They left her for dead in the blizzard. An Omega with no pack, no name, no future. But when Alara Voss opened her eyes 3 days later, she wasn't alone anymore. 20 massive white wolves surrounded her father's grave, and standing among them was the most feared alpha in the frozen north. He spoke 2 words that would shatter everything she thought she knew. "You're mine." What happened next would turn a broken girl into the most dangerous woman alive. Stay until the end to see how she made an entire kingdom kneel. Like and comment what city you're watching from. The wind screamed through Frost Hollow like a wounded animal, carrying ice that cut like broken glass. Alara Voss pressed herself against the cemetery gate, her thin coat doing nothing against the savage cold that had already claimed 3 lives this winter. Her fingers were blue, her lips cracked and bleeding, but she refused to turn back. Not today. Not on the anniversary of his death. "You're pathetic, you know that?" The voice came from behind her, rough, mocking, familiar, in the worst way. Alara didn't need to turn around to know who it was. Garrett, her pack leader's son, had been making her life hell since her father died 2 years ago. "Just let me pass," she said quietly, keeping her eyes on the cemetery gates. Beyond them, barely visible through the driving snow, stood her father's grave. She'd walked 3 miles in this storm just to get here. She wasn't turning back now. "Let you pass?" Garrett laughed, the sound cruel and sharp. 2 more shapes emerged from the snowstorm behind him, his usual followers, Marcus and Trent. All 3 were big, well-fed, wrapped in expensive winter gear. Everything she wasn't. "You think you have the right to walk around like you belong here? You're nothing, Alara. Your father was nothing, and without him, you're less than nothing." Alara's jaw tightened. She'd heard variations of this speech 1,000 times since her father's death. Ever since the pack elders had ruled his demise an accident, a fall during a winter hunt, they said. Case closed. No investigation needed, but Alara knew better. Her father had been the strongest tracker in 3 territories. He didn't just fall. Someone had made sure he fell. "I just want to visit his grave," she said, hating how her voice shook. Not from fear, from cold and exhaustion, and 2 years of barely surviving. "That's all. Then I'll go." "Go where?" Marcus sneered, stepping closer. "To that shithole shack at the edge of town? The one that's about to collapse? Or maybe she'll freeze to death before she gets there," Trent added. "Save us all the trouble." Garrett moved in front of her, blocking her path completely. At 6'4", he towered over her 5'5" frame. His eyes, cold and gray like dirty ice, looked her up and down with open disgust. "You know what your problem is, Omega? You don't know your place. Even after everything, you still think you matter. You still think you have rights." Alara's hands clenched into fists inside her threadbare gloves. She was an Omega, yes, the lowest rank in the pack hierarchy. But she was still a person. She still had a father who'd loved her, who'd taught her to track and hunt and survive, who told her she was worth something, no matter what the pack said. "My place," she said slowly, "is at my father's grave. And you're in my way." For a moment, genuine surprise flickered across Garrett's face. Then it hardened into something uglier. "You just made a mistake, little Omega." He reached for her, and Alara knew what came next. She'd been through it before. The shoving, the jeering, maybe worse if they were feeling particularly cruel. She could fight back, but that would only make things worse later. She could run, but they'd catch her easily. Or she could endure, like always, and hope they got bored quickly. But before Garrett's hand could close on her shoulder, something changed. The wind stopped. Not gradually. It just ceased, like someone had thrown a switch. The howling died to nothing. The snow hung suspended in the air for a heartbeat, and then fell straight down in an eerie, silent curtain. Garrett froze, his hand still extended. Marcus and Trent had gone completely still. Even through the cold that was slowly killing her, Alara felt it, a presence that made every instinct in her body scream danger. "What?" Marcus started to say. Then they appeared. One moment the cemetery was empty except for headstones and snow. The next there were wolves, massive, white as the storm itself, with eyes that gleamed like cold blue fire. They materialized from the blizzard as if they'd been carved from it, silent and utterly motionless. Alara counted them without thinking, her father's training kicking in automatically. 20 wolves, each one easily twice the size of any normal pack wolf, and they weren't approaching or circling or showing any normal wolf behavior. They were simply standing there, waiting. "Holy shit," Trent whispered. "Holy shit, those are—" "Shut up," Garrett snapped, but his voice had lost all its arrogance. He was staring at the wolves with something close to terror. "Everybody back away slowly. Don't make eye contact. Don't—" "Too late for that." The new voice cut through the silence like a blade through silk, deep, controlled, and carrying an authority that made Garrett's attempt at dominance look like a child playing pretend. From between two of the white wolves, a man stepped forward. No, not a man. An alpha. Alara had seen alphas before. Her pack leader, Thomas Garrett, father of the asshole currently trying not to piss himself in front of her, was an alpha. She'd met visiting alphas from other territories. She knew what they looked like, how they moved, the weight of presence they carried. This was something else entirely. He was tall, at least 6'6", with shoulders broad enough to block out the cemetery gates behind him. His hair was black as a raven's wing, long enough to brush his collar, and his eyes were a shade of amber she'd never seen before, almost glowing against his tanned skin. He wore a long coat of dark fur that probably cost more than every building in Frost Hollow combined, and underneath it she could see weapons, knives, at least, maybe more. But it wasn't his size or his gear that froze everyone in place. It was the sheer force of his presence. Standing there among his wolves, he radiated power like a furnace radiated heat. Alara could feel it pressing against her skin, making it hard to breathe, hard to think. This was an alpha who could crush their entire pack without breaking a sweat. "I asked a question," the stranger said, his amber eyes fixed on Garrett. "Is it too late for you to learn respect? Or should I teach you?" Garrett's face had gone pale. "We didn't know. We weren't. This is pack territory. You have no right." "I have every right." The stranger's voice dropped even lower, and somehow that made it more terrifying. "But if you want to challenge that claim, please continue talking." Garrett's mouth snapped shut. Marcus and Trent had already started backing away, their earlier bravado completely evaporated. The stranger's gaze shifted to Alara, and she felt the full weight of his attention like a physical force. Those amber eyes studied her, took in her threadbare coat, her blue fingers, the hollows in her cheeks from too many missed meals. She wanted to look away, to bow her head like a proper Omega should, but something in his gaze held her frozen. "You're Marcus Voss's daughter," he said. It wasn't a question. Alara's heart lurched. "You knew my father?" "I did." Something flickered in those amber eyes, respect, maybe, or regret. 2 years ago, he saved my life. I've been looking for you ever since." The world seemed to tilt sideways. "What?" Before the stranger could answer, Garrett found his voice again. "Listen, whoever you are, this is pack business. The girl is under our protection." "Protection?" The stranger's laugh was cold and sharp. "Is that what you call leaving an Omega to freeze in a blizzard? Interesting definition." "She chose to come out here," Garrett said, trying to sound authoritative and failing badly. "We were just trying to convince her to go home before she got hurt." "By putting your hands on her?" I saw you." The stranger took a single step forward, and all 3 pack wolves stumbled backward. "I saw exactly what you were about to do. So here's what's going to happen. You're going to leave, now. And you're going to tell your father that Cale Draven is in Frost Hollow, and he's here to collect a debt." The name hit like a thunderclap. Cale Draven, the Northern King. The alpha who ruled territories so far north that most wolves thought they were just legends. The alpha whose pack was said to be the largest and most powerful in existence, whose word was law across a frozen empire that spanned thousands of miles. And he was here, in their tiny, insignificant town, looking for her. Garrett had gone from pale to gray. "The debt. Your father never told us." "My father told me," Kael said softly. "And now I'm here to honor his wishes. The girl comes with me." "No." The word was out of Alara's mouth before she could stop it. 20 pairs of wolf eyes turned to her along with Kael's amber stare. Her heart hammered, but she stood her ground. "I don't know you. I don't know anything about a debt, and I'm not going anywhere until someone tells me what the hell is happening." For a long moment, Kael just looked at her. Then, surprisingly, he smiled. It was a small smile, barely a curve of his lips, but it transformed his face from terrifying to something almost human. "Fair enough," he said. "Your father saved my life during a hunting accident in the Northern Territories. I was young, careless, and I would have died if Marcus Voss hadn't pulled me from an ice crevasse and spent 3 days getting me to safety. Before he left, I swore a blood debt. Anything he or his family ever needed, I would provide." "He never mentioned you," Elara said. Her mind was reeling. Her father had saved the Northern King's life and never said a word? "I asked him not to. Blood debts can make people targets." Kael's expression hardened, which is why, when I heard he'd died in a suspicious hunting accident, I started asking questions. The cemetery had gone completely silent. Even Garrett seemed to have forgotten how to breathe. "What kind of questions?" Elara whispered. "The kind that revealed your father didn't fall." Kael's voice was gentle, but his words hit like hammer blows. "He was pushed, and the people who pushed him are still walking free." Alara's vision blurred. She'd suspected, had known in her gut that something was wrong, but hearing it confirmed, hearing it said out loud by someone with the power to actually do something about it. "You're lying," Garrett said, but his voice shook. "My father investigated personally. It was an accident. There was no evidence of—" "Your father," Kael said, "is one of the people I have questions for." The temperature seemed to drop another 20 degrees. Garrett's face went from gray to white. You can't just accuse. We have laws. And I have 20 of the finest warriors in the North, plus a blood debt to honor." Kael turned back to Elara. "Your father's last request, written in a letter I received the day before he died, was simple. If anything happened to him, I was to protect you, to give you the life and safety he couldn't provide in this place." Alara's throat tightened. A letter. Her father had known he was in danger, had known, and had tried to protect her anyway. "So here's my offer," Kael continued. "Come with me. Leave this place and these people who've done nothing but hurt you. In my territory, you'll have protection, resources, respect, everything your father wanted for you." "And if I refuse?" Kael's smile turned sad. "Then I honor your choice and leave. But I think we both know what happens then. How long do you think you'll survive the next winter here? The next week?" He wasn't wrong. Elara could feel death circling her like the wolves in the cemetery, patient, inevitable, just waiting for her to make one more mistake, to have one more particularly cold night. But going with a stranger, even one who claimed to have known her father— "I need proof," she said. "Something that shows you really knew him." Kael reached into his coat and pulled out a small object. Even in the dim light, Elara recognized it immediately. A carved wolf's head, no bigger than her thumb, made from white bone. Her father had worn it on a leather cord around his neck for as long as she could remember. "He gave this to me," Kael said softly, "the day we parted. Said it was a reminder that even the smallest wolf can have the biggest bite." Alara's hand trembled as she took the carving. It was warm from Kael's body heat, and she could see the tiny imperfection she'd memorized as a child. The slight chip in one ear, the scratch along the snout. It was real. All of it was real. "Elara, don't be stupid," Garrett said desperately. "You can't trust him. He's going to kill you the second you leave town." "If I wanted her dead," Kael said without looking at him, "she'd already be dead. Now leave, before I decide that your father isn't the only one I need to have a conversation with." Garrett's mouth opened and closed like a fish. Then he turned and ran, Marcus and Trent scrambling after him. Elara stood in the silence they left behind, clutching her father's carving. The white wolves hadn't moved. Kael waited, patient as stone. She thought about her shack at the edge of town, walls that barely kept out the wind, a roof that leaked, a fireplace that ate through her meager supply of wood in hours. She thought about the pack that had abandoned her the moment her father died, the protection that consisted of letting her slowly freeze and starve as long as she did it quietly. She thought about her father and the letter he'd written, and the fact that someone in this town had murdered him and gotten away with it. "If I come with you," she said slowly, "I want answers, real ones, about what happened to my father, about who killed him and why. You'll have them, and I want to be the one who makes them pay." Kael's smile returned, wider this time, showing teeth. "I was hoping you'd say that." He offered his hand. Elara looked at it, large, scarred, belonging to someone who could probably snap her in half without effort, and made her choice. She placed her hand in his. The moment their skin touched, something happened. A jolt of sensation ran up her arm, not painful, but intense, like lightning given physical form. Kael's eyes widened slightly, and she knew he'd felt it too. "Interesting," he murmured. "Very interesting." "What was that?" "Something I'll explain later. Right now we need to move. I don't trust your pack leader to stay away, and I'd rather not slaughter anyone today." "Rather not?" Elara asked as Kael led her toward the wolves. "I try to keep my body count down on Tuesdays," he said dryly. "Bad for diplomacy." Despite everything, the cold, the fear, the world-shattering revelations of the last 10 minutes, Elara almost laughed. Almost. The white wolves parted to let them through, and Elara realized they were even bigger up close than they'd appeared from a distance. Their shoulders came up to her chest, and their eyes held an intelligence that was frankly unsettling. "Are they pack warriors?" Kael confirmed. "In wolf form, yes. Don't worry. They don't bite unless I tell them to." One of the wolves made a sound that might have been a snort. Kael shot it a look. "Usually." They walked through the cemetery, past her father's grave. Elara wanted to stop, to say goodbye, but Kael's hand was firm on her back, keeping her moving. "We'll come back," he said quietly, reading her thoughts. "When this is over. I promise." Behind them, Frost Hollow was already waking up to the news. Elara could hear shouts, see lights flickering on in windows. The pack was gathering, probably organizing some kind of response to the Northern King appearing in their territory and stealing one of their members. Not that they'd ever considered her a real member. Not really. At the edge of town, a massive vehicle waited, some kind of armored transport that looked like it could drive through a mountain and come out the other side. More wolves stood guard around it, their breath steaming in the cold air. Kael opened the door and gestured for Elara to climb in. She hesitated at the threshold, looking back at the only home she'd ever known. It had been cruel to her, had taken everything she loved and ground it into dust beneath indifferent heels, but it was still all she knew. "Last chance," Kael said softly. "Once we leave, there's no going back." "Are you sure?" Elara thought about her father's grave, standing alone in the snow. She thought about Garrett's sneer and the pack's contempt and the slow death that awaited her if she stayed. And she thought about the carved wolf in her pocket and her father's words. Even the smallest wolf can have the biggest bite. "I'm sure," she said, and climbed into the vehicle. The interior was warm, blessedly, impossibly warm. Elara sank into the leather seat and felt heat seep into her frozen bones for the first time in months. Kael slid in beside her, and the wolves began climbing into the back compartment, shifting into human form as they did. Elara caught glimpses of them, men and women, all tall and strong and armed to the teeth. This was really happening. She was leaving with the Northern King and his pack of warriors, heading into territory she'd only heard about in stories. The vehicle began to move, its heavy tires crunching through snow. Elara watched through the window as Frost Hollow disappeared behind them, swallowed by the blizzard that had started up again the moment they'd left the cemetery. "Here," Kael said, pressing something warm into her hands. A thermos of some kind of soup, actual soup, with chunks of meat and vegetables. "You need to eat. You're half starved." Elara wanted to protest, to say she was fine, but her stomach betrayed her with a loud growl. Kael's expression softened. "It's not charity," he said. "It's debt repayment. Your father saved my life. The least I can do is keep his daughter from collapsing from hunger." Elara drank the soup. It was the best thing she'd tasted in 2 years. As warmth and food worked their magic, exhaustion crashed over her like a wave. Her eyes grew heavy, her head nodding despite her best efforts to stay alert. "Sleep," Kael said. "We have a long journey ahead. I'll wake you when we reach the border." "The border to what?" Elara managed to ask. Kael's smile was sharp and wild. "To the real north, little Omega. To a place where the strong survive and the weak become legends." Elara wanted to ask what that meant, but sleep was already pulling her under. Her last conscious thought was that she'd made a terrible mistake, or the best decision of her life. She wouldn't know which until it was far too late to matter. Whoa. The vehicle traveled through the night and into the next day, climbing higher into mountains that Alara had only seen from a distance. When she woke, it was to find herself covered in a thick fur blanket, with Kael still sitting beside her, reading something on a tablet. "How long was I asleep?" she asked, her voice rough. 18 hours. Alara sat up abruptly, and immediately regretted it as her head spun. Kael steadied her with one hand, the other offering her a bottle of water. "Easy. You were exhausted. Your body needed the rest." Alara drank the water and looked out the window. The landscape had changed completely. Gone were the gentle hills and sparse forests of her home territory. Instead, massive peaks of stone and ice rose on all sides, their tops lost in clouds. Snow here wasn't the soft white blanket she knew. It was hard-packed and ancient, carved by wind into strange shapes. "Where are we?" "The frozen reach," Kael said. "My territory. We'll arrive at the stronghold by sunset." "Stronghold? My home. It's impressive." That turned out to be an understatement. As the sun began to set, painting the snow in shades of gold and crimson, they rounded a curve and Alara saw it. The stronghold was built into the mountain itself, a massive structure of stone and ice that looked like it had grown from the peak rather than been constructed. Towers rose hundreds of feet into the air, connected by bridges that seemed impossibly delicate. Lights blazed from thousands of windows, and Alara could see figures moving along the walls, guards probably, or warriors. It was easily 10 times the size of all of Frost Hollow. Alara couldn't find words. "Home," Kael finished. He sounded almost embarrassed. "I know it's a lot, but you'll get used to it." The vehicle passed through gates that could have accommodated a building, into a courtyard where dozens of people waited. They all snapped to attention as Kael emerged, their fists going to their chests in salute. "Welcome back, Alpha," a woman said, tall with silver hair and scars crossing her face. "We received your message about the guest." "Guest, Sarah?" Kael raised an eyebrow. "Alara Voss is under my direct protection as repayment of a blood debt to her father. She's to be given quarters in the main tower, access to all facilities, and protection from anyone who even looks at her wrong. Spread the word." Sarah's eyes widened slightly, the first crack in her professional demeanor. "The main tower? But that's where she'll be safest. Is there a problem?" "No, Alpha. Of course not." Sarah's gaze shifted to Alara, and something like curiosity flickered across her scarred features. "Welcome to the Frozen Reach, Alara Voss. I'm Sarah Quinn, captain of the guard. If you need anything, you need only ask." Alara managed a nod, too overwhelmed to speak. People were staring, not with the contempt she was used to, but with open curiosity. Some looked confused, others intrigued. None looked openly hostile, which was already an improvement over her old pack. Kael led her through corridors of stone and ice, past rooms filled with people training, eating, working. The stronghold was a city unto itself, bustling with activity even as night fell. Everyone they passed stopped to salute Kael, their eyes lingering on Alara with questions they didn't voice. Finally, they reached a door near the top of the tallest tower. Kael opened it and gestured for Alara to enter. The room beyond was larger than her entire shack had been. A massive bed dominated one wall, piled high with furs and blankets. A fireplace roared with heat. Windows looked out over the mountains, offering a view that stole what little breath Alara had left. "This is too much," she said. "I can't—" "You don't need to—" "What I need," Kael interrupted gently, "is to honor the debt I owe your father. What I want is to see you safe and healthy. This room accomplishes both. End of discussion." He moved to the fireplace, adding another log. "There's a bathroom through that door with hot water. Clothes in the wardrobe that should fit. I had Sarah estimate your size. Food will be brought up in an hour. Tomorrow, we'll start going through your father's letter and the information I've gathered." Alara sank onto the edge of the bed, her mind still struggling to catch up. "Why are you doing this? I'm nobody. Just an Omega from a pack you probably don't even care about." "Your father," Kael said, turning to face her, "spent 3 days in sub-zero temperatures keeping me alive. He could have left me to die, probably should have, given how much trouble a Northern Alpha in your territory could cause. But he didn't. He saved my life, refused any payment, and asked only that if he ever needed help, I'd answer." Kale's expression hardened. And then he was murdered, and his daughter was left to die slowly by the same pack that killed him. So yes, Ilara Voss, I'm doing this, and I'm going to keep doing it until every person responsible for your father's death pays the price. The conviction in his voice made something crack in Ilara's chest. The wall she'd built around her grief and anger, the armor she'd worn to survive 2 years of slow torture. They really killed him, she whispered. It wasn't an accident. No, it wasn't. Why? What did he do? Kale was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, he found something, or knew something. I'm still piecing together exactly what, but it was enough to make him dangerous to someone powerful. And me? Do I know it too? I don't know yet, but we're going to find out. Kale moved toward the door. Get some rest, eat, recover. Tomorrow we start hunting for answers. He left, closing the door softly behind him. Ilara sat in the enormous room surrounded by more warmth and comfort than she'd known in years, and finally let herself cry. She cried for her father, for the life she'd lost, for the girl she'd been, who'd believed things would get better if she just endured. But mostly, she cried because for the first time since her father's death, she had hope. And hope, she was learning, was the most dangerous thing of all. Ilara woke to sunlight streaming through windows she didn't recognize, wrapped in blankets softer than anything she'd ever touched. For a disorienting moment, she thought she was still dreaming, that she'd wake up back in her freezing shack, hunger gnawing at her stomach, another day of survival stretching ahead like a prison sentence. Then she heard voices outside her door. Absolutely insane. She's an Omega from some backwater territory we've never even heard of. The Alpha gave direct orders, Cade. She's under his protection. Protection is one thing. Putting her in the main tower, giving her access to everything? What's next, a seat at the council table? Ilara sat up slowly, her muscles protesting. The voices continued, apparently unaware she could hear them. You didn't see how he looked at her, the first voice, Cade said. I've known Kale for 15 years. I've never seen him look at anyone like that. Maybe because he actually cared about her father, the second voice countered. Blood debts aren't games, Cade. You know that. Blood debts don't usually involve moving strange Omegas into the Alpha's personal tower. I'm telling you, Sarah, something else is going on. Ilara's stomach twisted. She'd been here less than 24 hours, and already people were talking, already questioning, already seeing her as a problem. Some things never changed, no matter how far north you went. She dressed quickly in clothes she found in the wardrobe, sturdy pants, a thick sweater, boots that actually fit. Everything was finer quality than anything she'd owned in her life, and she hated how much that mattered. Hated that even now, part of her was waiting for someone to snatch it all away and laugh at her for thinking she deserved it. When she opened the door, the conversation outside cut off immediately. Two people stood there, Sarah, the scarred woman from last night, and a man about Kael's age with dark skin and suspicious eyes, Cade, presumably. Good morning, Sarah said smoothly. Did you sleep well? Fine, Ilara said, though her voice came out rougher than she intended. I heard you talking. Cade had the grace to look embarrassed. Sarah's expression didn't change. Then you know there are questions about your presence here. That's natural. You're an outsider in a close-knit pack. I didn't ask to be here, Ilara said, fighting to keep her voice steady. And I don't want to cause problems. If there's somewhere else I can stay, there isn't. Kale's voice cut through the corridor like a blade. He appeared from around the corner, dressed in dark training clothes, his hair still damp from what looked like an early morning workout. And even if there were, you're staying exactly where you are. Cade straightened immediately. Alpha, I wasn't... You were questioning my judgment, Kale said calmly, in front of my guest. Would you like to continue doing so, or would you prefer to get back to your actual duties? Cade's jaw tightened, but he bowed his head. My apologies, Alpha. Ilara. He didn't sound particularly sorry. Sarah, escort Cade to the training grounds. I believe he has energy to burn. Kael's tone made it clear this wasn't a suggestion. Ilara, walk with me. We have things to discuss. Sarah and Cade left without another word, though Ilara caught the look they exchanged, a mixture of concern and disapproval that made her skin crawl. She'd seen looks like that before. They always preceded something bad. Kael waited until they were gone before speaking. Ignore Cade. He's protective, and he doesn't trust easily. He'll come around. Will he? Alara fell into step beside Kael as they walked down the corridor. Because it sounded like he thinks I'm here to seduce you or steal Pack's secrets or something equally ridiculous. Are you? Alara stopped walking. What? Kael turned to face her, and his expression was completely serious. Are you here to seduce me or steal Pack's secrets? No, I'm here because you dragged me out of a blizzard and told me my father was murdered. Then Cade's concerns are irrelevant. Kael resumed walking. Come on, breakfast first, then we talk. The dining hall was massive, easily capable of holding several hundred people. Right now it held maybe 60, all of whom stopped eating the moment Kael entered. Their eyes tracked him across the room, then shifted to Alara with varying degrees of curiosity and suspicion. Alara wanted to disappear, or turn around and run back to her room, or possibly sink through the floor. Instead, she followed Kael to a table near the front, trying to ignore the whispers that followed them like a wake. Is she the Omega? Why is she here? I heard she's from the south, some failed pack. Kael's never brought anyone here before. What makes her so special? Alara's hands clenched into fists under the table. Kael, loading his plate with food, seemed completely unconcerned. You get used to it, he said quietly. Pack politics. Everyone needs to know everything about everyone. It's annoying, but mostly harmless. Mostly? Well, occasionally someone tries to challenge me for leadership, and I have to break several of their bones. But that hasn't happened in at least 6 months. He said it so casually that Alara couldn't tell if he was joking. A woman approached their table, tall, beautiful, with honey blonde hair and the kind of confidence that came from never being told no. She smiled at Kael, completely ignoring Alara. Alpha, I heard you were back. We missed you at last night's council session. I was occupied, Lissa. Kael's tone was polite but distant. Is there something you need? Lissa's smile tightened just slightly. Just wondering if you'd be at tonight's gathering. Several important families want to discuss the southern border situation. I'll be there. Wonderful. Should I? Her eyes finally flicked to Alara, taking in her simple clothes and uncertain posture. Will you be bringing a guest? The way she said guest made it sound like an insult. Alara will attend as my personal guest. Yes, Kael said. In fact, I'll need you to make sure she has appropriate clothing. Sarah can provide her measurements. Lissa's smile became even more strained. Of course, Alpha. I'll see to it personally. She left, her posture radiating displeasure. Alara waited until she was out of earshot before speaking. I don't need to go to your gathering. I'll just stay in my room. No. Kael's voice was firm. You're under my protection, which means you're part of this pack. You attend gatherings, you eat in the common areas, you train with the warriors if you choose. You're not hiding. I'm not hiding. I'm trying not to make your life harder. Kael set down his fork and looked at her directly. My life became harder the moment I swore a blood debt to your father, and I'd do it again in a heartbeat, because Marcus Voss was one of the finest men I've ever known. His daughter deserves the same respect, and anyone who has a problem with that can take it up with me directly. The intensity in his voice made something warm and dangerous unfold in Alara's chest. She looked away before he could see whatever was showing on her face. They ate in silence for a few minutes before Kael spoke again. After breakfast, I need to show you something. Something your father left for you. Alara's head snapped up. What? In his letter, he mentioned that if anything happened to him, I should give you something he'd entrusted to me. Kael stood, picking up his plate. Finish eating. Meet me in my study in 20 minutes. Top of the tower. Door with the wolf carving. He left before Alara could ask any of the 1,000 questions exploding in her mind. 20 minutes later, she stood in front of a massive door carved with an intricate wolf design, its eyes inlaid with what looked like amber. She knocked, feeling ridiculous and nervous and angry all at once. Come in. Kael's study was exactly what she'd expected. Large, austere, filled with books and maps and weapons mounted on the walls. A massive desk dominated one end, covered in papers and tablets. Windows offered a panoramic view of the frozen mountains. Kael stood by one of the windows, holding a small wooden box. When he turned to face her, his expression was grave. Before I give this to you, you need to understand something. Your father knew he was in danger. He knew someone was coming for him. and he knew why. Ilara's mouth went dry. What did he know? That's what we're going to find out. Kael crossed the room and handed her the box. He gave this to me 2 years and 3 days ago, during his last visit north. He said if he died, I was to keep you safe and give you this. He said you'd know what to do with it. Ilara's hands shook as she took the box. It was made of dark wood, carved with symbols she didn't recognize. No lock, just a simple latch. She opened it. Inside was a single object, a small glass vial filled with silvery liquid that seemed to glow with its own light. Wrapped around it was a piece of paper, covered in her father's handwriting. Ilara unfolded the paper with trembling fingers and read, Ilara, if you're reading this, I'm gone. I'm sorry. I tried to protect you from this, but some secrets are bigger than one man's life. The vial contains what they've been searching for, what I've been hiding. It's encoded information, bloodline records, territorial claims, and proof of crimes that go back 3 generations. The people who run the wolf territories, the councils and the alphas, they've built their power on lies, on erasing certain bloodlines and elevating others. Your bloodline, Ilara. Our bloodline. We're not from some nobody pack in the south. We're descendants of the original northern rulers, the ones who were overthrown and scattered 200 years ago. The vial proves it. It contains genetic markers that only our line carries. They killed your mother when they found out she was pregnant with you. They would have killed us both if I hadn't run. I've been hiding ever since, but they finally found me. Give the vial to Kael Draven. He's one of the few alphas I trust. He'll know what to do with it, and he'll keep you safe. I love you. I'm sorry I couldn't tell you the truth, but you're stronger than you know. Strong enough to survive this. Strong enough to win. Dad. Ilara read the letter 3 times, the words refusing to make sense. Descendants of northern rulers, her mother killed, everything she knew about her family, about herself, was a lie? Breathe, Kael said softly. He was beside her suddenly, one hand on her shoulder, steadying her. I know it's a lot. A lot? Ilara's voice cracked. My father just told me everything about my life is a lie. That I'm, what, secret royalty? That's insane. That's completely true, Kael said quietly. I've been researching your bloodline since I got his letter. Your father wasn't lying, Ilara. You're a direct descendant of the Voss dynasty, the family that ruled the northern territories before the Great Purge. The Great Purge? 200 years ago, a coalition of alphas decided they didn't want to answer to a royal family anymore. They staged a coup, killed everyone they could find with Voss blood, and rewrote history to make it look like the dynasty had died out naturally. Kael's expression was grim. But clearly, some escaped, including your ancestors. Ilara looked down at the vial in her shaking hands. And this proves it? If it contains what your father said, yes. It's genetic proof, probably combined with historical records, enough to challenge the legitimacy of every major alpha family currently in power. So they killed him for it. Yes. Ilara's vision blurred with tears. She'd known her father was murdered, but knowing why, knowing he died protecting her, protecting this secret. Who? She asked, her voice hard. Who gave the order? That's what we need to find out. The vial is encoded. It needs to be analyzed by someone with the right equipment and knowledge. Someone we can trust absolutely. Kael hesitated. And there's something else, something your father mentioned in his letter to me. What? He said the genetic markers your family carries do more than prove bloodline. They confer certain abilities, particularly in carriers who manifest as Omega. Ilara's heart began to pound. What kind of abilities? He didn't specify, just said I'd know them when I saw them. Kael's amber eyes studied her intently. Have you ever experienced anything unusual? Power surges? Healing faster than normal? Sensing things you shouldn't be able to sense? Ilara thought back over her life. She'd always been good at tracking, at reading situations, at knowing when danger was near. But she'd assumed that was just training from her father, not... Wait. The wolves, she said slowly. Yesterday, in the cemetery, when your wolves appeared, I counted them. I knew exactly how many there were without thinking about it, and I could feel their positions, even the ones I couldn't see directly. Kale's expression sharpened. What else? Sometimes I know things. Not like visions, just certainties. Like yesterday, when Garrett was going to grab me. I knew exactly where his hand was going to go before he moved. Combat precognition, Kale murmured. That's a royal trait, rare even among the old bloodlines. But I'm an Omega. Omegas don't have power. Omegas in modern pack structure don't have power because they've been systematically suppressed for 2 centuries, Kyle corrected. In the old system, Omegas were considered sacred. They were peacekeepers, healers, strategists. The fact that you present as Omega with royal blood. He shook his head. If the old families knew what you were, they wouldn't just kill you. They'd start a war over who got to claim you. Alara felt sick. So what do? We find someone who can decode the vial. We get proof of everything your father claimed. And then, Kale's smile was sharp and cold. We burn down everyone who killed him. Before Alara could respond, the door to the study burst open. Sarah stood there, her face pale. Alpha, we have a problem. A big one. Kale was on his feet instantly. What happened? Delegates from Frost Hollow just arrived at the gates. 3 of them, including their pack leader. Sarah's eyes cut to Alara. They're demanding her return. The bottom dropped out of Alara's stomach. Thomas Garrett is here? With 2 council members and a squad of enforcers. Sarah's hand rested on the knife at her belt. They're claiming you were taken against your will, and that the Northern King has no authority over wolves from southern territories. Kale's expression went completely blank, which somehow made him more terrifying than if he'd shown anger. They're claiming I kidnapped her? They're demanding a formal hearing before the Territorial Council, saying that blood debts don't supersede pack law and that an Omega can't consent to leaving pack protection without council approval. That's bullshit, Alara said, anger flaring hot in her chest. I chose to leave. I went willingly. They'll claim you were coerced, Sarah said, frightened by the Alpha's power, unable to make a free choice. It's standard procedure when packs want to reclaim members. Members they never gave a damn about until someone else wanted them, Kale said softly. Then louder. Where are the delegates now? Waiting in the formal receiving hall. I put extra guards on them, just in case. Good. Tell them I'll see them in 1 hour. Kale turned to Alara. This is going to get ugly. Thomas Garrett didn't come all this way just to politely ask for you back. He wants something else. The vial, Alara said, understanding clicking into place. He knows, or suspects, that's why he killed my father. Probably, which means we need to be very, very careful about what we say and do next. Kale moved to his desk, pulling out papers. Sarah, I want every warrior on alert. No one enters or leaves the stronghold without my direct approval. And get me everything we have on Frost Hollow's pack leadership. Every scandal, every questionable decision, every debt. You're going to fight them? Sarah asked. I'm going to destroy them, Kyle said calmly. But first, I'm going to give them a chance to destroy themselves. Sarah left to carry out orders. Kale turned to Alara, and his expression softened just slightly. I need you to trust me. Can you do that? Alara thought about her father's letter, about the vial in her pocket, about 2 years of suffering under Thomas Garrett's rule. She thought about Kyle pulling her from the blizzard, giving her shelter, promising vengeance for her father's murder. Yes, she said, I trust you. Good, because what I'm about to do is going to look insane. Kale crossed the room to stand directly in front of her. In about 30 seconds, I'm going to claim you publicly as my mate. It's the only way to override pack law and make sure they can't take you back. Alara's brain stuttered to a halt. Your what? Mate. Partner. The formal declaration will supersede any claim Frost Hollow has on you. Mates can't be separated by pack law without both parties' consent. Kale's voice was urgent. It's political protection, Alara. Nothing more. I'm not asking you to actually... This is just legal maneuvering. You want to fake claim me? I want to keep you alive and out of Thomas Garrett's hands long enough to prove he murdered your father. This is how we do that. Alara's mind raced. A mate claim was sacred among wolves. Even a political one carried weight. If Kyle did this, it would change everything. How people saw her, how other packs treated her, her entire position in the territorial hierarchy. It would also make her a massive target. They'll know it's fake, she said. The moment they see us together, then we make it convincing. Kyle's amber eyes held hers. I need your permission, Elara. I won't do this if you're not willing, but if you say yes, you need to commit completely. Any hesitation, any sign that this isn't real, and they'll use it against us. Outside the study, Elara could hear activity increasing, warriors moving into position, orders being shouted. They were running out of time. She thought about Thomas Garrett's cruel smile, about Garrett Jr.'s hands reaching for her, about her father's grave standing alone in the snow while his killers walked free. Do it, she said. Claim me. I'll play my part. Kyle's expression flickered with something she couldn't read. Then he nodded sharply. Sarah? The captain appeared immediately, as if she'd been waiting right outside. Alpha. Send word to Thomas Garrett. Tell him I'll see him now. And tell him to prepare for a shock. Cale held out his hand to Elara. Ready? Elara took his hand and once again felt that jolt of connection, stronger this time, like lightning finding a conduit. Cale's fingers tightened around hers. Then let's go claim your freedom, he said, and start a war. They walked through the stronghold together, hand in hand, and everywhere they passed, people stopped and stared. By the time they reached the formal receiving hall, half the pack was following them, drawn by instinct or gossip or the electric tension in the air. The doors to the hall swung open, revealing Thomas Garrett and his delegation waiting inside. The Frost Hollow pack leader looked exactly as Elara remembered, big, brutal, with eyes like chips of dirty ice. He smiled when he saw her, the expression predatory. Elara Voss, it's good to see you safe. We've been so worried. I'm sure you have, Kyle said, his voice cutting through the false warmth like a knife. Worried enough to let her slowly freeze to death for 2 years? Thomas's smile didn't waver. You've been misinformed about our pack dynamics, Alpha Draven. Elara was well cared for. She was starving. Kyle's voice went cold. Living in a shack with holes in the roof. Eating maybe 1 meal every 2 days. That's your definition of care. She had options. She chose to live separately from the pack proper. She had no options, and you know it. Cale took a step forward, and the temperature in the room seemed to drop. But we're not here to debate your failures as a pack leader. We're here to address your claim that I've taken her against her will. Have you not? Thomas asked. Elara, dear, did you truly choose to leave with this man? Or were you frightened, coerced? You can tell us the truth. We'll protect you. It was perfectly done. The concerned tone, the gentle phrasing. If Elara hadn't known better, she might have almost believed he cared. She stepped forward, pulling her hand from Kyle's, and watched Thomas's smile widen. He thought she was going to accept his offer, thought she was going to run back to the pack that had tortured her for 2 years. You want the truth? She said clearly. Here it is. Cale Draven saved my life. You and your pack left me to die. I chose to leave with him, and I'd make the same choice 1,000 times over. Thomas's smile froze. Elara, you don't understand what you're saying, Jure. I understand perfectly. I also understand that you killed my father, and I'm going to prove it. The room exploded into shocked whispers. Thomas's face went purple. That's slander! Your father died in an accident. He was murdered, and you know it. Elara's voice rang out, clear and strong. But that's not the reason I'm never going back to Frost Hollow. The reason is simple. She turned to Kyle, who was watching her with those unreadable amber eyes. This was it, the moment that would change everything. I'm staying, she said, because Cale Draven has claimed me as his mate, and I've accepted. For a heartbeat, the hall was absolutely silent. Then chaos erupted, shouts of shock, disbelief, anger. Thomas Garrett looked like he'd been punched in the face. Cale moved to Elara's side, his hand settling possessively on her lower back. The gesture was subtle but unmistakable. She's mine now, he said, his voice carrying over the noise. Under territorial law, under pack law, under every law that matters. If you have a problem with that, Thomas Garrett, you can take it up with me, directly. Thomas's hands clenched into fists. You can't just... This is manipulation. She's an Omega. She doesn't have the authority to make this kind of decision without pack approval. She has every authority, Kyle said coldly. And if you're suggesting that Omegas aren't capable of choosing their own mates, I'd be very interested to hear your reasoning. I'm sure the Territorial Council would be fascinated as well. It was a perfect trap. If Thomas argued that Alara couldn't consent, he'd be admitting that Frost Hollow had been treating her as less than a full pack member, which would open them up to all kinds of legal challenges. If he backed down, he lost his claim on her entirely. Thomas's jaw worked, but no sound came out. Finally, he managed, "This isn't over." "It is," Kael said. "Leave my territory. Now. And if you ever come near my mate again, I'll take it as a declaration of war." The threat hung in the air, absolute and undeniable. Thomas stared at Alara, and for just a moment she saw pure hatred in his eyes. Then he turned and stalked from the hall, his delegation scrambling to follow. The moment they were gone, Alara's knees nearly buckled. Kael's arm tightened around her waist, holding her up. "Easy," he murmured. "You did perfectly, absolutely perfectly." Around them, the pack was still in chaos, some celebrating, some arguing, all of them talking at once. Alara barely heard any of it. She was too focused on the warmth of Kael's hand on her back, the solid strength of him beside her, and the terrifying realization of what they'd just done. She was mated to the Northern King. Fake or not, the claim had been made publicly. There was no taking it back now. And Thomas Garrett's expression as he'd left promised that this was only the beginning. Whatever came next, it was going to be bloody. The celebration lasted less than an hour before the first assassination attempt. Alara was in her room trying to process everything that had happened when the window exploded inward. Glass shattered across the floor as a figure dressed entirely in black dropped through, a curved blade already in motion toward her throat. Training she didn't know she had took over. Alara dove sideways, the knife missing her jugular by inches. She rolled, came up on her feet, and found herself facing a professional killer whose eyes showed no emotion whatsoever. "Nothing personal," the assassin said, and lunged again. Alara grabbed the nearest object, a heavy candlestick from the nightstand, and swung it with desperate force. The assassin blocked easily, twisted, and suddenly Alara was on the ground with a boot on her chest and a blade descending toward her heart. The door exploded off its hinges. Kael moved like violence incarnate, crossing the room in 2 strides. He caught the assassin's wrist mid-strike, twisted until bone snapped, and threw the killer through the already broken window. The scream cut off abruptly 3 stories down. "Are you hurt?" Kael demanded, pulling Alara to her feet. His hands moved over her quickly, checking for wounds, and she realized he was genuinely terrified. "I'm fine, just... what the hell was that?" "Exactly what I was afraid of." Kael moved to the window, looked down at the broken body in the courtyard below. "Professional. Too professional. Thomas Garrett doesn't have access to killers this skilled." "Then who does?" Before Kael could answer, Sarah appeared in the doorway with a dozen armed warriors. "Alpha! We have 3 more breach points. North Tower, Armory, and the main gates, all coordinated. Lock down the stronghold, full defensive protocols, no one in or out without my direct authorization." Kael turned to Alara. "You're coming with me. Staying in one place makes you a target." They moved through corridors that had transformed into a war zone. Warriors rushed past in full combat gear, the clash of steel echoing from somewhere below. Alara caught glimpses of fighting through windows, figures in black engaging with Kael's pack, the snow already stained red. "How many?" Kael asked Sarah as they descended a spiral staircase. "At least 20 that we've confirmed, could be more." Sarah's expression was grim. This wasn't a random attack. Someone planned this down to the minute. They reached Kael's study, which had been transformed into a command center. Maps covered every surface, warriors reporting in via radio, the organized chaos of a pack under siege. Cade was there, blood on his knuckles, his earlier suspicion of Alara apparently forgotten in the face of actual enemies. "We've got them contained in the East Wing, but they're not retreating. They're trying to push toward something." "Toward what?" Kael demanded. Cade's eyes cut to Alara. "Your mate's quarters. Every single breach team tried to reach that location first." The implications settled like ice in Alara's stomach. This wasn't about the mate claim or pack politics. This was about her specifically, about what she carried. Kael seemed to reach the same conclusion. "The vial. They know she has it." "How?" Alara asked. "I've told no one. It's been in my pocket since you gave it to me. Thomas Garrett, Sarah said grimly. He must have suspected what your father left you. He went back and told whoever's been pulling his strings. Then they'll keep coming. Cale moved to the window, looking out at the stronghold under attack. As long as Alara has the vial, she's a target. We need to decode it. Now. The nearest facility capable of that is 3 days' travel, Cade said, and the roads will be watched. They'll hit us the moment we leave the stronghold's protection. Then we don't use the roads? Cale turned back to the room. Sarah, how many of our best trackers are currently mobile? Maybe 15. Why? Because we're going to create a diversion. Kael's smile was sharp and dangerous. Multiple teams leaving the stronghold in different directions. Only one will have Alara. The others will be decoys. That's suicide for the decoy teams, Cade protested. The moment they realize which group is fake, the decoys know the risks. They're warriors. They'll lead the attackers on a chase through the worst terrain in the north. Kael looked at Alara. Can you ride? Ride what? A wolf. Alara's eyes widened. You want me to ride on an actual wolf's back? It's the fastest way to move through mountain terrain. And it's how my best warriors travel. Kael moved to a weapons cabinet, started pulling out gear. We leave in 1 hour. That gives us time to prep and for the decoy teams to get into position. An explosion rocked the stronghold, close enough to rattle the windows. Sarah cursed and moved to the radio. East Wing reporting. They've breached the armory, requesting immediate support. Denied, Kael said. Pull everyone back to defensive positions around the main tower. Let them have the armory. Alpha, that's an acceptable loss compared to what we're protecting. Kael's voice was absolute. Follow orders, Captain. Sarah's jaw tightened, but she relayed the commands. Alara watched the tactical display on the monitors, saw Kael's forces contracting, giving ground deliberately. It looked like retreat. It was probably a trap. Why are you really doing this? She asked Kael quietly while the others coordinated defensive positions. You could hand over the vial, end this siege, protect your pack. Kael turned to look at her, and his amber eyes were fierce. Your father saved my life. That debt isn't cleared by giving his killers what they want. And beyond that? He stepped closer. The information in that vial could change everything. The balance of power, the territorial hierarchy, centuries of lies. If what your father claimed is true, you're not just some random Omega. You're a threat to every corrupt Alpha who's built their authority on falsified bloodlines. So this is about politics? This is about justice, and about making sure the people who killed a good man pay the price. Kael's hand came up, cupped her face gently. But mostly, it's about keeping you alive. Because fake mate claim or not, I meant what I said. You're under my protection. Anyone who wants to hurt you goes through me first. The sincerity in his voice made something crack in Alara's carefully maintained armor. She'd spent 2 years learning not to trust anyone, not to hope for anything. And here was this powerful Alpha, risking everything for a debt to a dead man and a woman he barely knew. I don't understand you, she whispered. Good, Kael said, his thumb brushing across her cheekbone. That makes 2 of us. Another explosion, closer this time. The lights flickered. Time's up, Sarah said. If we're doing this, we need to move now. What followed was controlled chaos. Alara was fitted with winter gear designed for high-speed travel, lightweight but insulated, with weapons she barely knew how to use strapped to her body. Around her, warriors prepared with grim efficiency, each team moving out at staggered intervals. In the courtyard, massive wolves waited, not the white ones from the cemetery, but darker, built for speed and endurance. The one designated for Alara was black as midnight, with intelligent green eyes that studied her with what looked disturbingly like calculation. His name is Shadow, Kael said, running a hand along the wolf's flank. He's one of our fastest. He'll keep you safe. And you? Alara asked, looking at the equally massive gray wolf standing beside Kael. I'll be right beside you. Kael swung up onto the gray wolf's back with practiced ease. Storm and Shadow have been running together since they were pups. They know how to coordinate. Alara approached Shadow with considerably less confidence. The wolf lowered himself to make mounting easier, but she still needed Sarah's help to get properly settled. The moment she was in position, Shadow rose to his full height, and Alara grabbed fistfuls of fur to keep from falling off. Don't worry, Cade called from across the courtyard. mounted on a rust-colored wolf. Only about 30% of first-time riders fall off. That's not comforting, Elara shouted back. Kyle maneuvered Storm beside her. Lean forward into his movement. Let your body follow his rhythm and hold on tight. How tight is... Shadow took off like a rocket, and Alara's question turned into a strangled yelp. They exploded from the stronghold at a speed that defied belief, wolves carrying their riders through gates that had been blown open for the decoy teams. Behind them, Elara could hear other teams departing, the thunder of paws on snow echoing off the mountains. The attackers responded immediately. Figures in black emerged from hiding spots, some on wolves of their own, others on motorized sleds designed for snow terrain. They split to pursue different teams, exactly as Kyle had predicted. "How many following us?" Kyle called to Sarah, who rode a white wolf on his other side. "At least 6. Maybe more behind them." "Perfect. Let them commit." Kyle leaned forward, and Storm increased speed even further. Shadow matched him effortlessly, and Elara discovered that if she stopped fighting the motion and just moved with it, the ride became almost natural. Almost. They climbed higher into the mountains, following paths that seemed impossible. Narrow ledges with 1,000-foot drops, jumps across crevasses that made Alara's heart stop. The wolves moved with absolute confidence, their massive paws finding purchase on ice that should have sent them sliding to their deaths. Behind them, their pursuers struggled to keep up. 2 fell back when their wolves couldn't make a particularly treacherous jump. But 4 remained, dogged and determined. "They're persistent," Cade observed, looking back over his shoulder. "They're desperate," Cale corrected, "which makes them dangerous. Everyone stay sharp." They rode for hours through terrain that grew progressively more hostile. The temperature dropped to levels that would kill an unprotected human in minutes. The wind howled like a living thing, trying to tear them from their mounts. Snow fell so thick that Elara could barely see Kale riding just feet away. But the wolves knew the path. They moved with the confidence of animals who'd traveled these routes 1,000 times. And slowly, inevitably, they began to pull ahead of their pursuers. "We're going to lose them," Sarah said, sounding surprised. "Not yet," Kyle said grimly. "Look up." Elara looked up and felt her blood freeze. A helicopter, military grade by the look of it, appeared through the storm, searchlights cutting through the snow. It moved with clear purpose, tracking them despite the impossible visibility. "How?" Cade demanded. "We're running dark, no electronics, nothing to track." "They're tracking her," Kale said, looking at Elara. "Something about the vial. It must emit some kind of signal." Elara pulled the vial from her pocket. In the dim light, the silvery liquid inside seemed to pulse with its own rhythm, almost like a heartbeat. She'd assumed it was just some kind of data storage, but if it was broadcasting... "We need to destroy it," she said. "No," Kyle's voice was sharp. "That vial is the only proof of everything your father claimed. Without it, his murder means nothing. With it, we're leading them straight to wherever we're going." The helicopter banked, coming around for another pass. This time Elara saw the weapons mounted on its sides. Serious firepower, nothing stealthy about it. "Kyle," Sarah said urgently. "We can't outrun that thing. We need to make a choice." Kale's jaw tightened. For a moment he looked torn between impossible options. Then his expression hardened with decision. "Everyone scatter. Take different paths to the rendezvous point. Elara comes with me. We're going off-road." "Off-road?" Cade looked around at the already impossible terrain. "Kyle, there is no off-road from here. It's just cliffs and crevasses and the deep run," Kale said. Everyone went silent. Even the wolves seemed to pause, as if understanding what had just been suggested. "That's suicide," Sarah said flatly. "No one's successfully run the deep run in 5 years. The last team that tried, only one made it out alive. Which means it's not impossible, just very, very difficult." Kale looked at Elara. "The deep run is a series of connected ice caves that run through the mountain's interior. If we can reach the entrance, the helicopter can't follow. Neither can most ground pursuit." "But we could die down there," Elara said. "Yes, we could also die up here when that helicopter opens fire." Kale's smile was grim. "At least in the caves, we have a fighting chance." The helicopter's searchlight swept across them again, closer this time. Elara could see figures inside, aiming weapons. Do it, she said. Whatever gives us the best chance of getting this vial to someone who can decode it. Kael nodded sharply. Sarah, you have command. Get everyone to the rendezvous. If we're not there in 48 hours, you'll be there, Sarah interrupted, because you're too stubborn to die in some ice cave. Accurate assessment. Kael turned Storm toward a cliff face that looked utterly impassable. Ready, Alara? Absolutely not. Good enough. Shadow, with me. The two wolves launched forward, and suddenly they were dropping, not falling, but descending at an angle so steep it might as well have been free fall. Alara screamed, couldn't help it, and then they hit a slope of pure ice and started sliding. Behind them, the helicopter tried to follow, its searchlight tracking their descent, but the mountain had other ideas. A gust of wind caught the aircraft, slammed it sideways into a cliff face. The explosion lit up the night, debris raining down around them as Kael and the wolves navigated a path that seemed to exist only in Kael's mind. They hit bottom hard, the wolves absorbing the impact with flexed legs. Before Alara could catch her breath, they were moving again, racing toward what looked like a crack in the mountainside, barely wide enough for the wolves to fit through. Hold on, Kael shouted, and then they plunged into absolute darkness. The deep run was exactly as advertised, a nightmare of ice tunnels that twisted through the mountain's core like the burrows of some massive creature. The wolves' paws found purchase on ice so smooth it looked like glass, their enhanced vision navigating turns that came too fast for human eyes to track. Alara pressed herself flat against Shadow's back, trusting the wolf completely because she had no other choice. The darkness was absolute, broken only by brief glimpses of phosphorescent ice that lined some tunnels, giving them an eerie underwater quality. Time became meaningless. They could have been running for minutes or hours. All Alara knew was cold and darkness, and the sound of their breathing echoing off ice walls. Then, without warning, Shadow stopped. "What is it?" Alara whispered, but the wolf's low growl silenced her. Kael brought Storm alongside them, his hand coming up in a gesture for silence. In the darkness ahead, Alara could hear something, not wind or ice cracking, but movement, deliberate, coordinated movement. "They beat us here," Kael said quietly. Somehow, they knew about the deep run. "They were waiting." "That's impossible. Even I didn't know we were coming here until you decided." "Unless someone in my pack told them." Kael's voice was flat. "A traitor. Someone who knew about the deep run and predicted I'd use it." The implications settled like poison. Someone in Kael's inner circle had betrayed them, had probably been feeding information to their enemies from the beginning. Lights flared ahead, headlamps, at least a dozen of them, revealing a chamber where the tunnel widened. And standing in the center, surrounded by armed soldiers, was a figure Alara recognized from photographs in her father's belongings. Councilwoman Miranda Cross, one of the highest-ranking members of the Territorial Council. A woman whose authority spanned multiple territories and whose word could make or break entire packs. She smiled when she saw them, the expression cold and triumphant. "Alpha Draven, how predictable. I told them you'd come this way." Miranda's voice echoed off the ice walls. "And you brought the girl. Even better." "Miranda." Kael's voice was controlled, but Alara could feel the fury radiating from him. "You're the one behind this? The attacks? The assassination attempts?" "Behind them? Dear boy, I orchestrated them. Though I must say, you made things more difficult than necessary with that ridiculous mate claim." Miranda's eyes shifted to Alara. "Hello, little Voss. You look so much like your mother. She was beautiful too, right up until the moment we killed her." Rage exploded through Alara, hot and blinding. "You murdered my mother? And your father, and every other member of your wretched bloodline we could find." Miranda moved closer, her smile widening. "Did you really think we'd allow the Voss dynasty to rise again? That we'd risk everything we've built just because some dusty genetic records say you have royal blood?" "The vial proves more than bloodline," Kael said. "It proves that half the current Alpha families are illegitimate, that the Territorial Council's authority is based on fabricated claims." "Yes, which is why it can never be decoded." Miranda gestured, and her soldiers raised their weapons. "Give me the vial, girl. Last chance." Alara's hand closed around the vial in her pocket. She could feel it pulsing now, the rhythm increasing like a heartbeat, responding to stress. Strange warmth spread through her palm, up her arm, into her chest. "No," she said. Miranda's expression hardened. "Then you'll die like your parents. Soldiers." The world exploded, not outward, but inward. The warmth from the vial erupted through Alara's entire body. Not painful, but overwhelming. Power flooded her system, ancient and vast and absolutely terrifying. Her vision went white, then cleared to show something impossible. The vial had shattered in her hand, but instead of spilling on the ice, the liquid was absorbing into her skin, sinking through flesh and bone, writing itself directly into her DNA. And with it came knowledge. Not words or images, but pure understanding flooding her consciousness like a dam breaking. She wasn't just carrying proof of royal bloodline. She was the proof. The vial hadn't contained genetic information. It had contained the actual bloodline itself, dormant and preserved, waiting for the right host. Her father had encoded the entire Voss dynasty into liquid form and entrusted it to his daughter, knowing that only she could activate it. Alara's eyes snapped open, and she knew they were glowing, could feel the power radiating from them like light from a star. "Oh," Miranda whispered, and for the first time she looked afraid. "Oh no." The power continued to build, rewriting Alara's body from the inside out. She could feel her strength increasing exponentially, her senses expanding to encompass the entire ice cave. She knew where every soldier stood, could track Kyle's heartbeat and the wolves' breathing and Miranda's mounting terror. Most terrifyingly, she could feel the mountain itself, the ice and stone and ancient rock, and it responded to her presence like a subject recognizing its queen. "What did you do?" Miranda demanded. "What the hell did you do?" "I fulfilled my father's legacy," Alara said, and her voice resonated with power that made the ice walls vibrate. "The vial wasn't just evidence, it was an inheritance, and I just accepted it." She raised her hand, not entirely sure what she was doing, just following instinct written into her cells. The ice responded. Spikes erupted from the floor, from the walls, from the ceiling, targeting Miranda's soldiers with terrifying precision. Men screamed, weapons fired, but bullets ricocheted off ice that was suddenly harder than steel. In seconds, the cave had transformed into a forest of crystalline spears, each one positioned to kill. "Stand down," Alara commanded, her voice carrying an authority she'd never possessed before. "Or I collapse this entire cavern and bury all of us." Miranda stared at her, genuine fear replacing her earlier confidence. "You're bluffing. You'd kill yourself and the Alpha." "Try me." The ice walls creaked ominously. Cracks spread across the ceiling like spiderwebs. Alara wasn't entirely sure she could control what she'd started, but Miranda didn't need to know that. "Councilwoman," one of the soldiers said urgently, "we need to retreat, now." Miranda's hands clenched into fists. "This isn't over, girl. You think power makes you safe? You just painted a target on your back that every alpha in existence will hunt. You'll be dead within a month." "Maybe," Alara said, "but you'll be dead within a minute if you don't leave. Your choice." For a long moment, Miranda just stared at her. Then she turned and stalked toward one of the side tunnels, her soldiers scrambling to follow. Within seconds, they were gone, their headlamps fading into the darkness. The moment they disappeared, Alara's legs gave out. She would have fallen if Kale hadn't caught her, his arms wrapping around her waist and pulling her against his chest. "Easy," he murmured. "Easy. You did it. They're gone." "I can feel everything," Alara gasped. "The mountain, the ice, something deep underground that's alive and ancient and, Kael, what did I become?" "Something incredible," Kael said quietly. "Something that's going to change everything." The ice spikes Alara had created began to recede, melting back into the floor as if they'd never existed. But the power remained, thrumming through her veins like electricity. Alara pulled back enough to look at Kael and saw her own face reflected in his eyes. They were still glowing, casting amber light in the darkness. "We can't go back," she said. "Not to the stronghold, not anywhere. Miranda was right. I'm a target now. Everyone's going to come for me." "Let them come." Kale's smile was fierce and proud. "You're not the helpless Omega they're expecting anymore. You're a Voss, a queen who just reclaimed her throne." "I don't know how to be a queen." Good thing you have a king to help you figure it out. Kale's hand came up, cupped her glowing cheek. Fake mate claim or not, we're in this together now. You and me against everyone who wants us dead. Alara wanted to laugh or cry, or possibly both. Instead, she leaned forward and kissed him. Not gentle or tentative, but fierce and claiming and absolutely real. When they pulled apart, Kael was staring at her with wide eyes. That felt, he said slowly, very authentic for a fake claim. Maybe it's not fake anymore, Alara said. Maybe it never was. Before Kael could respond, Shadow made a low warning sound. Both wolves were staring at the tunnel where Miranda had disappeared, their hackles raised. What is it? Alara asked. Then she felt it, a rumbling deep in the mountain, growing stronger by the second. Not from Miranda's direction, but from everywhere at once. She set charges, Kael said, realization dawning. That bitch set charges throughout the deep run. She's going to bring down the entire tunnel system. With us inside. With us inside. The rumbling intensified. Cracks spread across the walls, chunks of ice beginning to fall from the ceiling. Kael grabbed Alara's hand and hauled her toward Shadow. Mount up! We need to outrun a cave-in! They leaped onto the wolves' backs as the deep run began to collapse around them. Shadow and Storm launched forward, racing through tunnels that were actively trying to kill them, ice falling like deadly rain. Alara held on with all her newfound strength, the power inside her responding to the danger by flooding her system with adrenaline and speed. She could see potential paths through the chaos, could sense where the collapse would hit next. Left tunnel, she shouted. The right one's about to cave. Kael didn't question her, just guided Storm to follow her direction. They veered left seconds before the right tunnel imploded behind them. They ran through a labyrinth of collapsing ice, following Alara's instincts and the wolves' incredible reflexes. Several times, they had to jump gaps that opened beneath them. Once, they were forced to slide under a falling wall of ice that missed crushing them by inches. Finally, when Alara thought they couldn't possibly survive another second, she saw it, a pinpoint of light ahead, growing larger as they raced toward it. Exit, Kael shouted. Don't slow down! They exploded from the mountain just as the entire deep run collapsed behind them, a massive plume of ice and snow erupting like a volcano. The wolves didn't stop, couldn't stop, their momentum carrying them down the mountainside in a barely controlled slide. They hit the bottom in a tumble of fur and bodies and snow, rolling until friction and gravity finally brought them to a stop. Alara lay on her back, staring up at the night sky, her whole body shaking from exertion and residual power and sheer disbelief that she was still alive. Beside her, Kael started laughing, not polite amusement, but genuine, uncontrolled laughter. We survived the deep run. We actually survived the deep run. Alara turned her head to look at him, saw blood on his face from a cut above his eyebrow, saw his eyes bright with exhilaration and terror, and something that looked disturbingly like pride. We survived, she agreed, then quieter. But Miranda's going to tell everyone what I am, what I can do. Kael's laughter faded. He sat up, pulled Alara up beside him. In the moonlight, her eyes were still faintly glowing. Let her tell them, he said. Let everyone know that the Voss dynasty isn't dead, that there's a queen in the north and she's done hiding. Shadow and Storm padded over, somehow uninjured despite the insane escape. They pressed against their riders, offering warmth and support. Alara looked back at the mountain where the deep run had been, now nothing but a pile of collapsed ice. Then she looked down at her hands, at the faint silver glow visible beneath her skin, the vial's contents now a permanent part of her. She thought about her father and the desperate gamble he'd made to preserve his bloodline. She thought about her mother, killed before Alara could even remember her. She thought about 2 years of suffering, of being cast aside and forgotten and treated as worthless. And she thought about the power now flowing through her veins, ancient and terrifying and absolutely unstoppable. Kael, she said quietly, what if I can't control this? What if I hurt people I don't mean to hurt? Then we'll figure it out together. Kael's hand found hers, threaded their fingers together. You're not alone anymore, Alara. For better or worse, you're stuck with me. Alara squeezed his hand, holding on to that promise like a lifeline. Because somewhere in the territories, Miranda Cross was already spreading the word, already turning every alpha, every council member, every power-hungry pack leader, against the girl who'd just reclaimed a throne they'd worked 2 centuries to destroy. The war was coming. It was inevitable now. And Alara Voss, former Omega, current queen, and the most dangerous woman in the North, would have to decide if she was ready to fight for a crown she'd never wanted in the first place. The safe house was nothing more than a hunter's cabin buried so deep in the wilderness that even most of Kael's pack didn't know it existed. Alara sat by the fireplace, watching silver light pulse beneath her skin in rhythm with her heartbeat, and tried not to think about how her entire existence had become a weapon pointed at the establishment. Kael was on the radio, his voice low and controlled as he coordinated with Sarah. "How many did we lose in the retreat?" 3 warriors confirmed dead, 7 injured, 2 critically. Sarah's voice crackled through the static. "But we got everyone else back to the stronghold. The decoy teams worked. Most of the pursuit went after them instead of you." "And the stronghold's defenses?" "Holding. But Kael, we're getting reports from the border territories. Miranda's telling everyone what happened in the caves, what Alara can do. The council is calling an emergency summit." Kael's jaw tightened. "When?" 3 days. They're demanding your presence, and hers." Sarah paused. "They're calling her an abomination, a genetic experiment that violates natural law. They want her turned over for examination and containment." Alara's hands clenched. Examination and containment. Pretty words for imprisonment and dissection. "Tell the council," Kael said coldly, "that they can examine my mate when they pry her from my dead hands, and not a moment before." "Kael, they're threatening sanctions, trade embargoes. They're talking about declaring you a rogue alpha if you don't comply." "Let them talk. We'll be there in 3 days. And Alara will show them exactly what she is, a rightful queen reclaiming what was stolen from her bloodline." Kael ended the call and turned to find Alara staring at him. "A summit? You want to walk into a room full of the people who murdered my family? I want to make them face what they've done, and what they created when they tried to destroy you." Kael crossed the room, knelt beside her chair. "Listen to me. Running won't work. Hiding won't work. These people have unlimited resources and no conscience. The only way we survive is by forcing them to acknowledge your legitimacy. They'll never do that. I'm everything they've spent 2 centuries trying to erase." "Exactly. Which makes you terrifying. And terror, properly leveraged, becomes power." Kael's amber eyes were intense. "But we need to be smart about this, strategic. We can't just walk in and expect them to bow." "Then what do we do?" A slow smile spread across Kael's face. "We give them a demonstration they'll never forget. We show them that you're not some genetic anomaly to be contained. You're the future of the wolf territories, whether they like it or not." Over the next 2 days, Kael trained Alara to control the power flowing through her veins. It turned out that the Voss bloodline came with abilities that went far beyond ice manipulation. She could sense other wolves within a 100-yard radius, track their heartbeats and emotional states. She could read terrain like a 3-dimensional map, instinctively knowing the safest paths and the most dangerous obstacles. And when she focused, she could project authority that made even Kael's most dominant warriors instinctively submit. "It's pack leadership coded into your DNA," Kael explained after Cade, who'd arrived with reinforcements, found himself kneeling without conscious choice when Alara had looked at him directly. The old royal bloodlines didn't just rule through strength. They had genetic advantages that made leadership natural. "That's horrifying," Alara said. "I forced him to kneel without even trying. Which is why you need to learn control. Fast." Kael helped a very confused Cade to his feet. "The summit is tomorrow. You need to be able to project authority without accidentally dominating everyone in the room." They practiced for hours. Alara learned to dial down the intensity of her presence, to project confidence without overwhelming submission. It was exhausting work, made harder by the fact that her power seemed to fluctuate based on her emotional state. When she was calm, she could control it precisely. When she was angry or afraid, it erupted unpredictably. "What if I lose control at the summit?" she asked Kael during a break. "What if I hurt someone I don't mean to hurt?" "Then I'll be there to ground you." Kael's hand found hers, and the moment they touched, Alara felt the wild fluctuations of her power stabilize. "Have you noticed?" We balance each other. Your power settles when we're in physical contact. Alara had noticed. It was one of several disturbing signs that their fake mate claim was becoming increasingly real. She could feel Kael's presence now like a compass point in her awareness. When he was near, her power felt controlled and purposeful. When he was away, it felt chaotic and dangerous. "That's not normal, is it?" she asked quietly. "No, but nothing about you is normal. And I'm starting to think that's the point." Kael lifted her hand, examined the silver glow visible beneath her skin. "The vial didn't just give you power, it rewrote your entire genetic structure. You're not the same person who left Frost Hollow. Is that good or bad? Depends on whether you survive the next few days." Kael's smile was grim. "But I'm betting on you. I've seen you face down death twice now. You're stronger than you know." That night, Sarah arrived with something unexpected. A package from an unknown sender addressed to Alara. "We scanned it for explosives and toxins," Sarah said, setting the small box on the table. "It's clean, but the sender used a courier service that specializes in anonymity. We can't trace it." Alara opened the box carefully. Inside was a single object, a crown made of ice that somehow didn't melt, its surface carved with symbols identical to those on the vial. And beneath it, a note written in elegant script. "Your mother wore this at her coronation. It was stolen the night she died. Now it returns to its rightful owner. Wear it to the summit. Show them what they destroyed. Show them what they failed to kill. A friend you don't know you have." Alara lifted the crown with shaking hands. It was cold, but not painfully so, and the moment she touched it, the silver glow beneath her skin intensified, resonating with the ice. "Put it on," Kael said softly. "What if it's a trick? What if—" "Put it on." Alara placed the crown on her head. Immediately, power flooded through her. Not the chaotic surges she'd been fighting to control, but focused and purposeful energy that felt like coming home. The crown didn't just sit on her head, it merged with her, becoming part of her genetic structure just like the vial had. Knowledge flooded her mind, memories that weren't hers, skills she'd never learned. She saw her mother wearing this crown, saw the palace that had been destroyed, saw the dynasty that had ruled for 1,000 years before being wiped out in a single bloody night. And she saw what the Voss queens had been capable of at the height of their power. "Holy shit," Cade breathed. Her eyes just went pure silver. Alara looked at her reflection in a window and barely recognized herself. The crown sat on her head like it had been made for her, which she realized it had been. Crafted specifically for Voss queens designed to amplify and focus their natural abilities. She was looking at a weapon. One that had terrified the old councils so much, they'd committed genocide to destroy it. "Tomorrow," she said, her voice carrying harmonics of power that made everyone in the room straighten to attention. "I'm going to that summit, and I'm going to show the Territorial Council exactly what they created when they tried to kill my family." Kael's smile was fierce and proud. "That's my queen." The summit was held in neutral territory, a massive meeting hall carved from mountain stone, designed to host gatherings of multiple packs. By the time Kael's convoy arrived, the parking area was filled with vehicles bearing insignias from every major pack in the northern and central territories. "They all came," Sarah observed, scanning the crowd gathering at the entrance. "Every alpha, every council member. Miranda really spread the word." "Good," Alara said, adjusting the crown on her head. She'd learned she could make it visible or invisible at will. Right now, she kept it hidden. No need to play all their cards immediately. Let them all see what happens when you try to destroy a dynasty. They walked through doors that opened to reveal a council chamber that could hold 500 wolves. Today it held at least 400, all of them turning to stare as Kael and Alara entered. The whispers started immediately. "That's her. The Omega who absorbed the vial. Look at her eyes. There's silver in them. Abomination." Alara lifted her chin and walked down the center aisle like she owned the place. Kael moved beside her, his presence alone keeping the crowd from doing anything more hostile than whisper. But she could feel their fear, their anger, their desperate need to believe she was a threat that could be eliminated. At the front of the chamber sat the Territorial Council, 12 alphas who collectively governed wolf territories spanning half a continent. Miranda Cross sat among them, her expression triumphant. The head councilman, an ancient wolf named Victor Stone, gestured for silence. Alpha Draven, you've brought the genetic anomaly as requested. I've brought my mate, Kale said coldly, who is also a direct descendant of the Voss dynasty. Show some respect, councilman. Respect? Miranda laughed. For something created in a laboratory? For a genetic experiment that violates every natural law? I wasn't created in a laboratory, Ilara said, her voice carrying through the chamber without her needing to raise it. I was born to Marcus and Elena Voss. You murdered my mother when I was an infant. You murdered my father 2 years ago. And you tried to erase my entire bloodline because you were afraid of what we represented. We were protecting the natural order, Victor said. The Voss dynasty fell because it had become corrupt and dangerous. Their genetic manipulation, their unnatural powers, were completely natural, a new voice interrupted, and have been documented for over 2,000 years. Everyone turned. Through a side door walked a woman Ilara had never seen before, elderly, with silver hair and eyes that held deep intelligence. She carried herself with authority that rivaled the council members, and several alphas actually stood in deference to her presence. Dr. Sarah Chen, Victor said, and he sounded worried. This is a closed council session, which you opened the moment you started spreading lies about genetic anomalies. Dr. Chen moved to the center of the chamber, pulling out a tablet. I'm the foremost expert on wolf genetics in the world. I've studied bloodlines for 40 years, and I can tell you with absolute certainty that Ilara Voss is not an experiment. She's a miracle. She activated the tablet, projecting data onto screens around the chamber. The Voss bloodline carries genetic markers that predate modern wolf packs by millennia. They're not mutations. They're ancestral traits that most wolves have lost through dilution. The abilities you're calling unnatural are actually the original template from which all modern wolves descended. That's impossible, Miranda said, but she sounded less certain. It's documented fact. The Voss dynasty ruled because they carried the purest expression of original wolf genetics. And yes, their omegas were powerful, because in the original genetic structure, omega wasn't a rank, it was a specialization. Dr. Chen looked directly at Ilara. May I? Ilara nodded, not entirely sure what she was agreeing to. Dr. Chen approached and pulled out a small device. This is a genetic scanner. With your permission, I'd like to show everyone here exactly what you are. Ilara held out her hand. The scanner beeped, analyzed, and then projected a three-dimensional image of her DNA structure into the air above them. The crowd gasped. Ilara's genetic code was unlike anything in the projection libraries. Where normal wolf DNA showed standard double helix structures, hers showed complex geometric patterns that seemed to shift and reconfigure. And running through everything was the silver glow, visible even in the genetic scan. This, Dr. Chen said quietly, is what wolf genetics looked like before the Great Purge, before the systematic elimination of royal bloodlines, before we lost 90% of our genetic diversity in the name of natural order. She turned to the council. You didn't destroy the Voss dynasty because they were corrupt. You destroyed them because they reminded you that you were all pretenders to a throne you'd stolen. The chamber erupted. Alphas shouting, council members trying to maintain order, everyone talking over everyone else. Ilara stood in the center of it all, watching 2 centuries of lies crumble in real time. Victor Stone's gavel came down like a gunshot. Silence! The noise cut off abruptly. Victor's face was red with fury. Dr. Chen's theories are irrelevant. What matters is that this girl has absorbed a genetic weapon that makes her a threat to every stable pack structure in existence. She must be contained for the safety of all wolves. Contained? Kale's voice was dangerously soft. You mean imprisoned, studied, probably dissected to see if you can replicate her abilities. If necessary, Miranda said, for the greater good. Whose greater good? Ilara asked. Her power was building now, responding to the threat. She could feel the crown activating, focusing the energy. The greater good of alphas who built their authority on murder and lies? The greater good of a council that commits genocide to maintain power? Careful, girl, Victor warned. You're very close to treason. Treason against what? A government that tried to kill my entire family? Ilara's eyes began to glow silver. You want to see what I am? What I'm capable of? Fine. Let me show you. She let the crown become visible. Gasps rippled through the chamber as the ice crown materialized on her head, its surface reflecting light like 1,000 diamonds. And then she released the power she'd been holding back. Authority poured from her like a tidal wave, ancient and absolute. Every wolf in the chamber felt it, the genetic imperative to submit to a true Voss queen. Alara didn't force anyone to kneel. She simply let them feel the full weight of what she was. Half the room went to their knees instinctively. The other half fought it, their own alpha authority warring against the primal recognition of royalty. Even the council members struggled, several of them visibly shaking with the effort of remaining upright. Only Kael seemed unaffected, standing beside her like a pillar of strength. "This is what you tried to destroy," Ilara said, her voice carrying harmonics that made the stone walls vibrate. "This is what you were so afraid of, that you murdered children, that you erased history, that you built an entire governmental structure on the corpse of a dynasty you couldn't control." "Stop this!" Victor gasped, still fighting to remain standing. "Stop this now, or You'll what?" Ilara turned her glowing gaze on him. "Kill me? You've been trying that for 2 years. It hasn't worked out well for you so far." "We are the Territorial Council," Miranda snarled, though she'd dropped to one knee. "We have armies, resources, legal authority. You're one girl with stolen power. Inherited power," Dr. Chen corrected. "And she has something you don't. Legitimacy. Real, genetic, undeniable legitimacy." Alara pulled back her authority, allowing everyone to breathe again. The wolves who'd knelt climbed shakily to their feet, looking confused and ashamed and awed all at once. "I don't want your territories," Alara said into the silence. "I don't want to rule over packs or govern councils, but I won't be hunted anymore. I won't be contained or examined or disappeared like my parents were. So here's my offer." She reached into her pocket and pulled out a small device, a data drive that Dr. Chen had prepared for them. "This contains a complete genetic analysis of my bloodline, along with historical documentation that Dr. Chen has verified. It proves everything I've said. It proves the Voss dynasty was legitimate, and it proves that half of you have no real claim to the territories you control." Alara tossed the drive to Victor, who caught it reflexively. "You have a choice. Acknowledge my bloodline's legitimacy. Stop trying to kill me, and we can coexist peacefully. I'll stay in the north, you'll stay out of my way, and we'll all pretend the last 2 centuries didn't happen." "And if we refuse?" Miranda asked. Alara smiled, and it wasn't a nice expression. "Then I release that data publicly. Every pack in existence will know that their alpha's authority is built on fabricated bloodlines. Every omega will learn that they've been systematically suppressed for 200 years, and you'll have a revolution on your hands that makes the Great Purge look like a minor disagreement." The threat hung in the air, absolute and undeniable. Victor looked at the data drive in his hands, then at Alara, then at the council members around him. She could practically see him calculating, weighing the cost of war against the cost of acknowledgement. Finally, he spoke. "The council will need time to review this information, to verify Dr. Chen's analysis, to consult with—" "You have 48 hours, Kael said. "After that, we assume you've made your choice, and we act accordingly." "This is blackmail," Miranda spat. "This is survival," Alara corrected. "Mine and yours. Choose wisely." She turned and walked from the chamber, Kael beside her, the crowd parting before them like water. Behind them, she could hear the explosion of voices as every alpha and council member tried to talk at once. They made it to the convoy before Alara's legs gave out. Kael caught her, pulled her into the vehicle, and held her while she shook from the adrenaline crash. "That was incredible," he murmured against her hair. "Absolutely incredible. Did you see their faces?" "I almost killed everyone in that room," Ilara whispered. "I could feel it. If I'd pushed just a little harder, they all would have submitted completely. And I wanted to, Kael, for just a moment. I wanted to make them all kneel and never get up again." "But you didn't. That's what matters." Kael pulled back enough to look at her. "You controlled it. You made your point, and then you stopped. That's the difference between a tyrant and a queen. I don't feel like a queen. I feel like I'm about to throw up." Kael laughed and kissed her forehead. "Welcome to politics. It gets easier." "Does it?" "No, but you get better at hiding the nausea." They drove back toward the Northern Territories, Sarah reporting in with updates as they traveled. The summit had dissolved into chaos after their departure, with alphas forming factions and council members calling emergency sessions. Dr. Chen had been bombarded with questions about her research, and Miranda Cross had reportedly left the chamber looking like she'd aged 10 years. "We've got movement on the southern border," Sarah said as they neared the stronghold. 3 pack delegations requesting audience with you. Not hostile, they're calling you, Your Majesty, and asking for treaties. Alara and Kale exchanged looks. "Already?" Alara asked. "Some of the smaller packs have been waiting for someone to challenge the Council's authority for decades," Sarah explained. "You just gave them a leader to rally behind." "I don't want to be a leader." "Too late," Kale said, though he was smiling. "You just backed the Territorial Council into a corner in front of 400 witnesses. People are going to follow you whether you want them to or not. That's terrifying. That's power, and you're going to have to decide what to do with it." They arrived at the stronghold to find it transformed. Warriors lined the walls in full ceremonial armor, banners flying from every tower. And standing in the courtyard was what looked like half the pack, all of them in their finest clothes, all of them waiting. "What is this?" Alara asked. "A coronation," Sarah said quietly. "Unofficial, but real. The pack wants to acknowledge what you are, what you've become." Alara stepped from the vehicle, and the entire courtyard dropped to one knee, not from forced submission, but from genuine respect. "Rise," she said, her voice carrying easily across the space. "Please, I'm still just Alara." "You're our queen," said an elderly warrior near the front. "Whether you claim the title or not, you stood before the council and made them afraid. You showed them that the North doesn't bow to corrupt authority. That's worth acknowledging." Tears stung Alara's eyes. These people, Kale's pack, who'd been suspicious and wary of her just days ago, were offering loyalty. Real, genuine loyalty that had nothing to do with genetic commands or forced submission. "I don't know how to be a queen," she said honestly. "I'm still learning how to control this power. I'm still figuring out who I am." "Then figure it out here," Kale said, taking her hand, "with a pack that will support you, with warriors who will fight for you, with—" He hesitated, then smiled, "with a mate who loves you, fake claim or not." Alara's breath caught. "What?" "You heard me. I love you, Alara Voss. I think I started falling the moment I saw you standing in that blizzard, half frozen and completely defiant. And watching you face down the Territorial Council today just confirmed it." Kael's amber eyes were intense. "So yeah, the claim started as political maneuvering, but it's real now, at least for me." The courtyard was completely silent, everyone watching and waiting. Alara looked at this powerful alpha who'd risked everything for a debt to her father, who'd protected her and trained her and stood beside her against impossible odds. And she realized she'd been lying to herself about her own feelings for quite a while. "I love you too," she said, and kissed him in front of the entire pack. "Arrogant, overprotective, absolutely insane alpha that you are." The courtyard erupted in cheers. Warriors howled their approval, and somewhere someone started drumming, a traditional celebration rhythm that others quickly picked up. When they finally pulled apart, both breathless and grinning, Sarah appeared with something in her hands, a formal message sealed with the Territorial Council's official insignia. "This came by emergency courier while you were otherwise occupied," she said, her tone dry. Kale opened it, scanned the contents, and then started laughing. They accepted. The Council officially acknowledges Alara's bloodline and agrees to cease all hostile actions against her or anyone harboring her. They gave up? Alara couldn't believe it. Just like that? Not gave up. Made the smart choice. Kale showed her the message. They're offering a formal treaty. You stay in the North, they stay out of Northern politics, and in exchange they won't release the information about fabricated bloodlines. Everyone saves face. And Miranda? Being removed from the Council pending investigation into unauthorized military actions. Kale's smile was sharp. Translation? They're throwing her to the wolves to avoid taking responsibility themselves. It wasn't complete justice. It wasn't even close. But it was survival. It was acknowledgement. It was a future where Alara didn't have to constantly look over her shoulder. "We won," she said, still trying to process it. We actually won. You won, Kyle corrected, by being brave enough to stand in front of everyone who wanted you dead and show them exactly why that was a bad idea. Elara looked around at the celebrating pack, at the stronghold that had become home, at the man who'd saved her life and ended up capturing her heart. 3 days ago, she'd been a forgotten Omega slowly freezing in a cemetery. Now she was a queen with a crown of ice and a pack full of warriors who called her Your Majesty. The transformation should have been impossible. But then again, everything about her life had become impossible the moment Kael Draven had stepped from the blizzard and said 2 words that changed everything. You're mine. And standing here now, with a crown on her head and love in her heart and a future that actually looked survivable, Elara Voss finally believed him. She was his. He was hers. And together, they'd just rewritten 200 years of history. The war wasn't over. There would be challenges ahead, power plays and political maneuvering, and people who'd never accept a Voss Queen's return. But for tonight, they'd won. And that was enough. The celebration lasted 3 hours before reality crashed back in. Elara was dancing with Kyle, actual dancing, not the careful political maneuvering of the past week, but genuine joy when Sarah appeared at the edge of the courtyard, her expression grim enough to cut through the music and laughter. Alpha, Your Majesty, we have a situation. Kael's hand tightened on Elara's waist before he released her. What kind of situation? The kind where Thomas Garrett just showed up at our gates with 200 wolves and a declaration of war. The courtyard went silent. Every warrior's hand moved instinctively toward weapons. Elara felt her power surge in response to the threat, the crown on her head flaring to brilliant visibility. He's insane, Cade said, appearing from the crowd. The council just acknowledged Elara's legitimacy. Attacking her now is suicide. Unless he knows something we don't, Kyle said grimly. He turned to Sarah. What are his demands? No demands, just a challenge. He's invoking the right of contested authority. Says that Elara's claim to royal bloodline is invalid because she's never proven herself in combat against a recognized alpha. Sarah's jaw was tight. It's an ancient law, technically still on the books. If she refuses the challenge, he can claim she's a pretender. But if she accepts and loses, Elara said quietly, understanding the trap, I'm dead, and Thomas gets to claim he defeated a false queen. Either way, he wins politically. Not if you kill him first, Kyle said, his voice hard. But his eyes, when they met Elara's, showed worry. You've had 6 days of training. Thomas has been alpha for 20 years. He knows every dirty trick in the book. Then I'll learn some new ones. Elara straightened her shoulders, feeling the weight of the crown and the power flowing through her veins. Take me to him. If he wants a demonstration of what a Voss Queen can do, let's give him one he'll never forget. The gates of the stronghold opened to reveal Thomas Garrett standing in the snow with an army at his back. He looked exactly as Elara remembered, brutal, confident, utterly convinced of his own superiority. When he saw her approaching, his smile was pure predatory satisfaction. Little Elara Voss, all dressed up in your stolen crown, playing queen. His voice carried across the open ground between them. Did you really think a few parlor tricks would make the Territorial Council bow to you forever? They're already having second thoughts, especially when they hear how you died screaming. Big talk from a man who murders unarmed trackers in the woods, Elara called back. Her voice didn't shake, and she was proud of that. How did it feel, Thomas? Pushing my father off that cliff? Did you do it yourself, or were you too cowardly to get your hands dirty? Thomas's smile widened. I did it myself. Looked him right in the eyes while he fell. And you want to know the best part? He knew it was coming. Spent his last moments knowing that his daughter would die cold and alone, just like he did. Rage exploded through Elara, hot and blinding. The crown flared with silver light, and the ground beneath her feet cracked as ice erupted from the frozen earth. Every wolf present felt the surge of power, primal and terrifying. Careful, Thomas taunted. Wouldn't want to lose control in front of all these witnesses. Might make people think you're dangerous, unstable. Exactly the kind of genetic anomaly that needs to be put down. He was baiting her, trying to make her lose control so he could claim she was a threat. But knowing the strategy didn't make it less effective. Not when he was admitting to murdering her father, not when he was standing there grinning about it. Kael's hand found hers, and the touch grounded her. The wild surge of power stabilized, focused. He's trying to make you fight angry, Kael murmured. Don't give him that advantage. I'm going to kill him, Alara said, her voice flat. I know, but do it smart. Do it clean. Make it a demonstration that terrifies everyone watching. Alara took a deep breath, pulled herself together, and stepped forward. I accept your challenge, Thomas Garrett. Right of contested authority, witnessed by both our packs. To the death. To the death, Thomas agreed, and his eyes gleamed with anticipation. No weapons, no outside interference, just alpha against whatever you are. I'm a queen, Alara said softly, and you're about to learn what that means. The combat circle was drawn in the snow, a traditional fighting ring 40 feet in diameter. Warriors from both packs formed the outer boundary, their presence ensuring no one could interfere. Dr. Chen appeared from somewhere in the crowd, positioning herself where she could observe. This is madness, she said to Kael. She's had less than a week to learn control. Thomas has been killing other alphas for 2 decades. I know, Kael said. His face was carved from stone, but Alara could feel his fear through their connection. But if I try to stop this, they'll say she hides behind me, that she's not really a queen, just my pet project. So you're letting her walk into a death match. I'm trusting her to be what she is, what she was born to be. Kael's eyes never left Alara as she removed her coat, standing in just her fighting clothes. A survivor, a warrior, a queen who doesn't need anyone to fight her battles. Alara stepped into the circle. Thomas was already there, stripping off his shirt to reveal a body covered in scars, evidence of dozens of fights, dozens of victories. He was massive, easily twice her weight, with muscles built from a lifetime of violence. She was a half-starved Omega who'd learned to fight 6 days ago. The odds were absurd, but the crown on her head pulsed with power, and Alara could feel her mother's memories flowing through her, techniques and strategies from 1,000 years of Voss queens who'd defended their authority with blood and ice. Last chance to run, Thomas said. I'll make it quick if you bow now. Admit you're nothing but a genetic mistake and a liar. You first, Alara said. Thomas lunged. He was fast for his size, crossing the distance between them in a heartbeat. His fist drove toward Alara's face with enough force to shatter bone. She moved on instinct, the combat precognition her father had noticed, showing her exactly where the blow would land, a fraction of a second before it arrived. She wasn't there when his fist fell. She was 3 feet to the left, her own hand coming up to rake across his exposed ribs with fingers that had somehow grown claws of pure ice. Thomas roared more in surprise than pain and spun to face her. Blood dripped from the shallow cuts on his side. Tricks. Parlor tricks. Let's see how they work when I break every bone in your body. He came at her again, faster now, not giving her time to think. Alara fell back on training she shouldn't have, muscle memory from her mother's time flowing through her like water. She dodged, blocked, countered, not trying to match Thomas's strength, but using his own momentum against him. She was learning something terrifying. Her body knew how to fight. The Voss genetic code included combat techniques refined over millennia. She just had to trust it. Thomas landed a hit, a glancing blow to her shoulder that still sent her stumbling. Pain exploded through her arm, but with it came a surge of power. The crown flared, and ice erupted from the ground beneath Thomas's feet, trying to trap him. He shattered it with brute force, sending shards flying. Is that all you've got? Ice tricks? Your mother had the same abilities. Didn't save her when we put a knife in her back. The taunt was designed to enrage her. Instead, it focused her. Because Alara understood something now. Thomas wasn't just here to kill her. He was here to prove that the Voss dynasty deserved extinction, that royal blood meant nothing against brutal strength. He was wrong. Alara stopped retreating. She planted her feet and let her power build, not in wild surges, but in controlled, purposeful waves. The temperature around the circle dropped 20 degrees in seconds. Frost spread from where she stood, creeping across the ground like living crystal. You want to know what makes a queen, Thomas? She asked, her voice carrying over the watching crowd. It's not just power. It's knowing when to use it, how to use it, and against whom. She raised her hands, and the ice responded. Not creating barriers or weapons this time, but something far more insidious, The moisture in the air began to crystallize, forming a fine mist that settled over everything. Thomas laughed. "What's this? Making it foggy? That's your grand strategy?" "No," Alara said. "This is." She clenched her fists, and every molecule of ice in the mist responded simultaneously. The air itself became a weapon, razor-sharp crystals that sliced through skin like invisible knives. Thomas screamed as thousands of tiny cuts appeared across his exposed skin. Not deep enough to kill, but enough to hurt. Enough to bleed. Enough to make him understand that he was fighting something beyond his experience. He charged through the pain, relying on his size and strength. Got his hands on Alara and slammed her to the ground with bone-jarring force. The impact drove the air from her lungs, and for a moment she saw stars. Thomas's hands closed around her throat. "You're still just a little Omega," he snarled, his face inches from hers. "All the tricks in the world don't change that. You're weak. You've always been weak, and now you're going to die weak." Alara couldn't breathe, couldn't speak. The edges of her vision were going dark, but she could still think, could still feel the power flowing through her veins, could still access the genetic memory of every Voss queen who'd faced death and survived. She placed her hands on Thomas's chest, not to push him away, but to make contact, and then she released every ounce of power she'd been holding back. The effect was instantaneous and devastating. Ice didn't just form on Thomas's skin, it formed inside him, crystallizing the blood in his veins, freezing the moisture in his lungs. He released Alara's throat with a strangled gasp, trying to pull away, but her hands were locked onto him now. "You asked what I am," Alara said, her voice rough from his chokehold, but absolutely steady. "I'm the daughter of Marcus and Elena Voss. I'm the heir to a dynasty you tried to destroy. I'm the queen you created when you murdered my family." The ice spread through Thomas's body like a disease, visible beneath his skin as silver veins of frozen death. He tried to speak, to beg, to do anything but die. But his vocal cords had already frozen solid. "And I'm the last thing you'll ever see," Alara finished. Thomas Garrett shattered. Not metaphorically, literally shattered, his body fragmenting into thousands of pieces of frozen flesh and ice that scattered across the circle like macabre snow. The silence that followed was absolute. Alara stood in the center of the ring, covered in frost and blood, the crown on her head blazing with silver light. Around her, 200 of Thomas's wolves stared in paralyzed horror at what remained of their leader. Then, one by one, they began to kneel. Not from forced submission, not from genetic compulsion, from genuine, terror-driven recognition of superior power. Within minutes, every wolf from Frost Hollow was on their knees, heads bowed, offering surrender to the queen who'd just executed their alpha. Alara turned to find Kael standing at the edge of the circle, his amber eyes wide with something between awe and concern. She walked toward him on shaking legs, and the moment she stepped outside the combat ring, her knees buckled. Kael caught her, pulled her into his arms. "That was the most terrifying thing I've ever seen," he murmured against her hair. "And I've seen a lot of terrifying things." "Did I go too far?" Alara whispered, "turning him into ice sculpture?" "You proved your point, decisively." Kael pulled back to look at her. "Every alpha who witnessed this will think twice before challenging you. And every wolf who sees what you can do will understand that the Voss dynasty isn't just history. It's the future." Dr. Chen appeared beside them, her expression a mixture of scientific fascination and human horror. That shouldn't have been possible. The level of control required to freeze someone from the inside out without affecting yourself, that's beyond anything the old records documented. "Maybe the old records were incomplete?" Alara said. She was shaking now, adrenaline crash hitting hard. "Or maybe I'm something new. Something that happens when you try to destroy a bloodline and fail." "Either way," Sarah said, approaching with Cade and a dozen warriors, "we now have 200 wolves from Frost Hollow who just swore fealty to you. What do you want to do with them?" Alara looked at the kneeling wolves, Thomas's pack, the same people who'd ignored her suffering, who'd laughed when she'd struggled, who'd turned away when she'd needed help. She should hate them, should want revenge against every person who'd made her life hell. But standing there, looking at their terrified faces, she realized something. They'd been following a corrupt alpha because that was all they'd known. Thomas had ruled through fear and violence, and they'd obeyed because the alternative was death. Now they had a choice, a real choice. And how Alara handled this moment would define what kind of queen she would become. "Rise," she said, her voice carrying across the assembled wolves. They rose hesitantly, waiting for judgment. "Your alpha is dead, executed for murder, for corruption, and for challenging a queen's legitimate authority." Alara walked among them, meeting eyes, seeing fear, but also hope. "You followed him because you had no other option. I understand that. I lived under his rule. I know what it cost to defy him." She stopped in the center of the group. "So here's what happens now. You have a choice. You can return to Frost Hollow and elect a new alpha, someone who will lead with honor instead of fear. I'll provide resources to help rebuild what Thomas destroyed through his greed. Or," someone asked from the back, "or you can join my pack, not as servants or conquered wolves, but as equals, as people who deserve better than what Thomas gave you." Alara's voice was steady. "I'm building something new here, a pack that values all its members, not just the strongest, where Omegas aren't treated as disposable, where justice matters more than power." "Why would you offer that to us?" Garrett Jr. stepped forward, the same man who'd tormented Alara in the cemetery. His face was pale, his hands shaking. "We treated you like garbage. We let my father—" His voice broke. "We didn't help you." "No, you didn't," Alara agreed. "But you also didn't have a choice. Your father would have killed anyone who tried." She looked at him directly. "I'm not offering this because I've forgiven you. I'm offering it because I believe people can be better than their worst moments, and because I refuse to become the same kind of leader Thomas was." Garrett Jr.'s eyes filled with tears. He dropped to his knees again, but this time it wasn't from fear. "I'm sorry for everything, for what my father did to you, for what I did to you. I'm so sorry." Around him, other wolves began to kneel, not in submission, but in genuine remorse, and Alara understood that this moment was more powerful than any display of force could be. This was the moment she became a true queen, not by destroying her enemies, but by offering them redemption. "Rise," she said gently, "all of you. If you want to rebuild Frost Hollow, I'll help. If you want to join my pack, you're welcome. Either way, you're free. No more fear, no more tyranny, just choices." The celebration that followed was different from the one earlier, more somber, but also more meaningful. Warriors who'd been enemies hours ago shared food and stories. Frost Hollow wolves mingled with northern pack members, finding common ground. And Alara stood on a balcony overlooking it all, still processing everything that had happened. Kale found her there, draping a warm cloak over her shoulders. "You could have destroyed them, taken Frost Hollow by force, made them all submit." "That's what Thomas would have done." "Yes, and you're not Thomas. You're better." Kale turned her to face him. "You offered mercy to the people who tormented you, redemption to the wolves who followed a murderer. That's not weakness, Alara. That's strength of a kind most alphas never develop." "I just didn't want to become the monster they tried to make me," Alara said quietly. "My father taught me that power without compassion is just tyranny. I want to be better than that." "You are better than that." Kale's hand came up to cup her face. "You're going to be an incredible queen, and I'm going to be right beside you watching it happen." "Is that a promise?" "That's a vow, from a king to his queen." Kale's smile was soft and genuine. "Speaking of which, our mate claim started as political maneuvering, but I think it's time to make it official. Real, permanent." Alara's heart skipped. "Are you asking what I think you're asking?" "I'm asking if you'll have me, not as a political alliance or a strategic partnership, but as an actual mate, someone who loves you and wants to build a future with you." Kale's amber eyes were intense. "So what do you say, Alara Voss? Will you be my queen?" "Only if you'll be my king," Alara said, and kissed him. The official mating ceremony took place 3 days later, witnessed by both packs and representatives from a dozen territories. Dr. Chen officiated, reading from ancient texts that hadn't been used in 2 centuries, the traditional bonding ritual for Voss royalty and their chosen mates. Alara wore her mother's crown and a dress made of ice that somehow never melted, created by her own power, and shaped by Sarah's surprisingly artistic sensibilities. Kyle wore the formal armor of the Northern King, black and silver, and absolutely stunning. When they spoke the ancient vows, Alara felt something click into place. Not just emotional connection, but a genuine genetic bond that tied their bloodlines together. It was more than marriage, more than mating. It was the joining of two dynasties, creating something entirely new. By the power vested in me by historical precedent and genetic authority, Dr. Chen said with a smile, I declare you bonded mates, king and queen of the Northern Territories. May your reign be long and your enemies short-lived. The crowd erupted in howls of celebration. Alara and Kyle kissed while ice and fire swirled around them, her power and his combining in a display that left everyone breathless. Later, after the ceremony and the feast and the endless congratulations, Alara stood at the highest point of the stronghold, looking out over her territory. From here, she could see for miles the frozen mountains, the dark forests, the scattered lights of packed settlements. It was beautiful, harsh and deadly, but beautiful. Thinking about the future? Kyle asked, joining her with 2 glasses of wine. Thinking about how fast everything changed. 3 weeks ago, I was nobody. Now I'm a queen with a territory and a pack, and responsibilities I barely understand. You'll learn. We'll learn together. Kyle handed her a glass. And you won't be alone. That's what the mate bond means. You carry half my strength, I carry half your burden. Alara sipped the wine and leaned against him. The council is still going to be a problem. Miranda might be gone, but there are others who will never accept a Voss on any throne. Let them try something. They saw what you did to Thomas. They're not going to risk open conflict anytime soon. What about the wolves who are still suffering under corrupt alphas? The other Omegas who are being treated the way I was? Kale smiled. Are you planning a revolution, Your Majesty? Maybe. Is that allowed? You're a queen. You can do whatever you want. Kale's expression turned serious. But if you're asking whether I'll support you in creating real change, in challenging pack structures that have stood for 2 centuries, the answer is yes. Absolutely yes. Alara turned to face him fully. It won't be easy. We'll make enemies. Powerful ones. We already have powerful enemies. Might as well make them count. A year later, Alara stood in the same spot, but the view had changed dramatically. What had been scattered settlements were now coordinated communities. What had been isolated packs were now a unified Northern alliance. And what had been a corrupt territorial system was now facing its first real challenge in 200 years. The Northern Territories had become a refuge for displaced Omegas, a place where rank mattered less than capability. Alara's reforms had spread to neighboring packs, and while some alphas resisted, others had seen the benefits of treating all pack members with dignity. It wasn't perfect. There were still challenges, still conflicts, still people who wanted the old ways back. But change had begun. Real, lasting change. Alara watched the sunset paint the snow in shades of gold and crimson, her hand resting on her swollen belly. The baby kicked, responding to her mother's power with its own burst of genetic energy. Active tonight? Kale asked, his own hand joining hers. Very. I think we're having a warrior. Or a queen. Why not both? Alara smiled. She'll need to be strong. The world we're building, it's going to need leaders who understand both power and compassion. She'll have the best teachers, Kyle kissed Alara's temple. Her mother, who turned trauma into transformation, who became a queen not by claiming power, but by proving worthy of it. And her father, who saved a stranger in a blizzard and ended up changing history. They stood together as darkness fell and stars emerged, watching over a territory that had become more than just their home. It had become proof that the past didn't have to define the future, that the people cast aside and forgotten could rise up and reshape the world. Far to the south, in the chambers of the Territorial Council, old alphas argued about the northern threat. They spoke of sanctions and strategic responses and the danger of allowing change to spread. They didn't understand yet that it was already too late. The forgotten Omega they'd tried to destroy had become a queen who couldn't be ignored, and her revolution, quiet, persistent, unstoppable, was already spreading through every territory, every pack, every wolf who'd ever been told they didn't matter. Thomas Garrett's frozen fragments still lay preserved in a vault beneath the stronghold, a reminder to anyone who might challenge Alar's authority. But she rarely thought about him anymore. The past was dead, shattered like ice in the sun. The future, though, the future was alive with possibility. Alara Voss had been the girl no one protected, the Omega everyone forgot, the daughter whose parents were murdered for being too powerful to control. Now she was the queen who proved them all wrong. And standing beside her king, with their child growing strong inside her, overlooking a territory she'd transformed through courage and compassion and the kind of power that came from refusing to break no matter how hard the world pushed, she had never been more ready for whatever came next. The blizzard that had nearly killed her 3 weeks ago had been the end of one life and the beginning of another. A chrysalis of ice and snow that had transformed a girl into something the world had tried to destroy 2 centuries ago and failed. A Voss queen, a warrior, a survivor, and above all else proof that even the smallest wolf could have the biggest bite if they were brave enough to show their teeth.